You know that highly specific feeling that
Yeah.
hits you right around 7 o'clock on a Sunday evening.
Oh, yeah, the Sunday dread. I know it well.
Right, exactly. You've just finished dinner. The weekend is technically still happening.
Yeah.
But your brain has like already fast forwarded to Monday morning.
Yep. You're already mentally answering emails.
Exactly. It's that creeping sense of dread, the sudden realization that the midweek slump is already out there just waiting for you.
Yeah.
But I want you to imagine something for a second.
Okay, I'm listening.
What if that feeling simply didn't exist? What if the weekend didn't actually have to wait until Friday evening? Like, what if this entire 5-day work week we all just blindly accept as a law of nature is actually just, an outdated habit?
It's an incredibly sticky habit, I'll give you that, but a habit nonetheless, and honestly a relatively recent one in the grand scheme of human history.
Right, which is wild to think about.
It is. We treat the Monday to Friday schedule like it's gravity, like it's a physical law of the universe, but it's fundamentally just a social construct.
And that construct is exactly what we're unpacking today. So the mission of this deep dive is to look at a massive stack of global data and sources on the 4-day workweek.
Which is everywhere right now.
It really is. And we want to separate the utopian wishful thinking hype from the actual boots-on-the-ground reality. Because companies and even entire countries are trying this. We're going to figure out what actually happens when society decides to just chop a day off a calendar.
And we really need to set the stakes right up front, too, because this is about so much more than just getting an extra day to sleep in.
Or like having time to catch up on laundry.
Right. When you fundamentally alter the amount of time humanity spends at work, you are intersecting with massive global economics. You are changing the trajectory of carbon emissions.
I know, yeah.
You are entirely redefining the future of human productivity. I mean, we are looking at a structural shift in how society operates on a macro level.
So before we can even talk about how to change the work week, we have to understand why it is currently 5 days long to begin with. Because, like you said, it's not gravity.
Not at all.
The 5-day week is a cultural norm, and it was essentially born from early 1900s union advocacy. Labor movements literally had to invent the concept of the weekend just to get people down from a brutal 60-hour work week.
Which was incredibly dangerous, by the way. 60 hours in an early factory was no joke.
Yeah, so they fought to get it down to a 40-hour one.
And that's the crucial context here. The assumption back then was that the reduction in hours was just the beginning of a trajectory. Like the 40-hour week wasn't supposed to be the finish line.
Wait, really? They plan to keep going?
Oh, absolutely. Look at the famous economist John Maynard Keynes. In 1930, he looked at the sheer math of the Industrial Revolution. He saw machines pumping out 10 times the widgets in half the time.
Okay.
And based on those productivity improvements, he confidently predicted that within a couple of generations, a 15-hour work week would be entirely possible.
A 15-hour work week, that sounds like absolute science fiction today. I mean, that's barely 2 full work days.
I know it sounds crazy to us now. But he wasn't the only one who saw things heading that way. Everyone from Benjamin Franklin to Karl Marx to George Bernard Shaw predicted continuing drastic reductions in working hours.
So across the entire political and philosophical spectrum, basically.
Exactly. They just assumed that as machines got better, the human dividend would be time. In fact, in 1933, the United States came incredibly close to passing a 30-hour workweek bill.
The Black Connery bill, right?
Yeah.
I read that it actually passed the Senate.
It did. It passed the Senate. But it ultimately collapsed, and the reason why is really fascinating. The Great Depression forced a massive pivot in economic philosophy.
Because suddenly everyone was out of work.
Right. The priority shifted overnight from let's work fewer hours because we are so productive to we need full employment immediately because people are literally starving.
Wow. So it was a crisis response.
Yeah. President Roosevelt and his administration prioritized creating jobs over reducing hours for the people who already had them.
But even decades later, the expectation was still sort of lingering in the culture, wasn't it? Because in 1956, Vice President Richard Nixon was out there promising Americans they would only have to work 4 days in the not-too-distant future.
Yeah, the momentum was always there in theory, but never really in practice.
Okay, let's actually unpack this. If everyone from Karl Marx to Richard Nixon saw a radically shorter work week coming, why did we suddenly stall at 40 hours for nearly a century?
That's the big question.
To me, it feels a lot like the QWERTY keyboard on your laptop or phone. Like, That layout was originally designed in the 1800s to deliberately slow typists down so the mechanical keys on a typewriter wouldn't jam.
Right, because if you typed too fast, the metal arms would get stuck together.
Exactly. But we don't have mechanical keys anymore. The technology completely changed. But we're still stuck with the QWERTY layout just because everyone got used to it.
Yeah.
Are we just living in the QWERTY layout of work schedules?
That is a brilliant way to frame it. I really like that. The 40-hour week absolutely became our QWERTY keyboard. The Great Depression froze the evolution of the work week, and then society just built its entire infrastructure around that specific rhythm.
Right. Everything is built around it.
Schools, retail hours, public transit, rush hour, they all synchronized to the 5-day schedule. To change the work week means desynchronizing society, which is incredibly difficult.
Because it disrupts everything else.
Exactly. It stayed frozen until the COVID-19 pandemic completely shattered our assumptions about workplace flexibility. Then you had events like the 2023 United Auto Workers strike.
Where organizers actively pushed for a 32-hour week, right?
Yes. That forced the conversation back onto the global table. And, just to be clear, based on our sources, whether you lean left or right on those labor movements, they are drawing direct inspiration from that stalled 1930s activism. We're just reporting what the sources say here, but the historical link is undeniable.
Which brings us from the history into the actual mechanics of how we fix this. We've established that the work week is malleable, but to actually change it requires shifting how we fundamentally value work.
Yes, the how is the tricky part.
Right. So how are modern companies making this shift? Because right now, the gold standard seems to be sociology professor Juliet Schor's optimal model. It's called the 100-80-100 rule.
It's an elegant formula, honestly, and it relies heavily on behavioral psychology. Workers receive 100% of their pay for 80% of their previous time.
Okay, so that's the 4 days.
Exactly. But in exchange, there's a commitment to maintain 100% of their productivity. What Schor's model does is force a structural shift from measuring value by the hour to measuring value by the output.
But there are variations out there, right?
Yeah.
It's not just a blanket Friday off situation for everyone across the board.
No, not at all. There are a few different ways organizations are trying this.
You have things like the 980 schedule, where you work a normal 5-day week and then a 4-day week alternating.
Right, which is popular in corporate settings.
And then there's the concept of splitting the days off right in the middle of the week. Look at Singapore. Based on the data, the Raffles Institution shifted their junior college students to a 4-day school week by giving them Wednesdays off.
Oh, Wednesday off. They call it a gap day for rest and self-study.
Yeah, and the psychology behind that Wednesday gap day is actually profound. Think about how that changes the pacing of a person's life.
You never work or study for more than 2 days in a row.
Exactly. You never hit that Thursday wall of absolute exhaustion. When they polled those students, something like 89 to 95% found it incredibly beneficial.
That's a massive approval rating.
And it had zero negative impact on their academic results. They just absorbed the material better because their cognitive load was managed.
I love the gap day idea, but I do want to bring up another variation that's really common right now, which is the compressed schedule.
The 4-10 schedule.
Yeah. This is where you still work the full 40 hours, but you do it over 4 10-hour days instead of 5 8-hour days.
Right, and I want to push back on that one, because isn't that just cramming 5 days of exhaustion into 4?
It definitely can be.
It's like eating 5 days worth of meals in 4 days just to save time on chewing. You're still doing the exact same amount of work, you're just extending the misery of those 4 specific days.
I see your point. And for knowledge workers who are just like staring at a screen all day, a 10-hour day can absolutely cause cognitive burnout. But let's play devil's advocate for a second based on the labor data.
Okay, let's hear it.
If you are a physical laborer commuting an hour and a half each way to a job site, eliminating that 5th commute saves you 3 hours of unpaid, stressful travel time.
Oh, that's true. 3 hours a week adds up fast.
Exactly. So for some, it's a huge relief. However, over the long term, the data does show you're right about the burnout. There is a critical difference between truly reduced hours, like the 180-100 model, and merely compressed hours.
Because compressed hours aren't really about the employee at all, are they?
Often, no. Compressed hours are frequently implemented as a cost-cutting measure for the employer. For example, look at the Utah state government in 2008.
What did they do?
They shifted their employees to a Monday through Thursday, 10-hour-a-day schedule. By entirely closing state government offices on Fridays, the state saved an absolute fortune on operating costs.
By keeping the lights off.
Yeah, we're talking electricity, heating, air conditioning, and even gasoline for state-owned vehicles.
Wow. But did it last?
It didn't. They actually ended the practice in 2011 and went back to 5 days.
Only 3 years later. Why?
Citizens were frustrated they couldn't access government services on Fridays, and the employee burnout was very real. Unless the underlying productivity paradigm changes, unless you change how the work is actually done, simply compressing the hours doesn't solve burnout.
It just redistributes it into heavier, more exhausting chunks. Okay, so theory and localized cost cutting are one thing. But theory is only great until it hits the real world. What actually happens when massive corporations and entire nations put the true 100-80-100 model to the test?
This is where the data gets really exciting.
It really does. This brings us to the global laboratory portion of our deep dive. Let's look at Microsoft Japan in 2019.
Such a phenomenal case study in ruthless prioritization. In the summer of 2019, Microsoft Japan gave their workers paid leave on Fridays.
Nice.
But they didn't just tell them to do the same work in less time and, cross their fingers. They fundamentally changed the structure of the workday. They cut the length of most meetings from a full hour down to a strict 30 minutes.
And didn't they cap attendance too?
Yes, they capped meeting attendance at a maximum of 5 employees.
Which is brilliant. Think about the calendar invites sitting in your inbox right now. How many of those are hour-long blocks simply because Google Calendar or Outlook defaults to an hour?
Almost all of them, honestly.
It's Parkinson's law in action, right? Work expands to fill the time allotted for it. By forcing that meeting cap, Microsoft Japan saw their electricity costs drop by 23%.
But the productivity numbers are the crazy part.
Yeah, their sales per employee jumped by 40%. 40%. Just by getting out of their own way.
It proves that the secret sauce to the 4-day wint isn't just working faster, it's aggressively eliminating wasted time. And we see similar structural success with Perpetual Guardian, which is a trust company in New Zealand.
Oh, right, the Andrew Barnes trial.
Exactly. In 2018, their founder, Andrew Barnes, initiated a trial for over 240 staff members. They got a day off each week while receiving full pay.
And what happened to their bottom line? Because that's what every CEO listening is wondering right now.
Their revenue remained entirely stable while their overhead costs went down. But Barnes discovered ripple effects that went way beyond his company's balance sheet.
Like what?
Well, staff reported drastically lower stress, and customer engagement actually went up. But Barnes realized he had stumbled onto something even bigger. He positioned the 4-day week as a tool to help close the gender pay gap.
Wait, how does a 4-day week close the gender pay gap?
Think about who predominantly takes on part-time roles or requests flexible hours to handle childcare. Historically and statistically, it's women.
Right.
And those flexible tracks often penalize them in terms of promotions and wage growth. But if the entire company is operating on a 4-day week, you level the playing field?
Oh, I see. Because everyone is working the same schedule.
Exactly. The stigma of needing time off for caregiving vanishes because everyone is off on that 5th day. Barnes also pointed out that his company's policy noticeably eased traffic congestion in Auckland on their days off.
You change one corporate HR policy, and suddenly the city's traffic grid gets better. That is just incredible.
It really shows how interconnected all of this is.
And that macro-level impact is exactly what they saw in the UK trial, which is the world's largest pilot of the 4-day week to date. 61 companies, almost 3,000 employees.
A massive sample size.
Huge. Everyone from office-based software developers to local fish and chip shops. And the results were staggering. More than 90% of the companies that tried it are continuing with it.
90%.
Yeah, and 18 of them made it permanent immediately. But here's the stat from the sources that really blew my mind. Employees in the trial experienced massive drops in childcare and commute costs.
Which makes sense, eliminating a day of commuting and a day of daycare.
Right. They saved an average of over 3,200 pounds a year for a parent with 2 children.
Think about what that actually means for a family. Over 3,000 pounds. That is a massive financial stimulus for a household.
It's months of groceries or paying down debt.
Or simply the profound mental relief of not having to rush to daycare an extra morning a week. These trials reveal that the 4-day work week is not just a quirky perk to attract tech talent.
No, it's way bigger than that.
It is an urban planning tool. It is an economic relief mechanism for working parents.
And an environmental one, too.
Oh, crucially environmental. A study from the University of Massachusetts concluded that a global shift to a 4-day work week could cut humanity's carbon footprint by nearly 30%.
Wait, hold on. 30% of global emissions just from taking Friday off. How does the math on that possibly work?
It's a combination of direct and indirect energy savings. First, you are drastically reducing commuter emissions.
Because millions of cars are staying off the road for a full day.
Right. Second, you are shutting down massive office buildings, which lowers the baseline energy consumption of the corporate world. You don't have to heat or cool those skyscrapers.
Which takes an immense amount of power.
Exactly. And we have actual proof of concept at a national level for this kind of societal shift. Look at Iceland.
Oh, the Iceland trials were huge.
Yeah, between 2015 and 2019, they ran trials that included more than 1% of the country's entire population. And this wasn't just tech workers.
Right, it was hospitals, preschools, social service offices.
They reduced working hours to 35 or 36 hours a week without a pay reduction. It was deemed such an overwhelming success that, following the trials, 86% of the country's workforce secured permanent reductions in their working hours.
Okay, so the white-collar results are glowing. The environmental results are glowing. But we promised you, the listener, that we would look at the hard data and not just the utopian hype.
We have to look at the full picture.
Exactly. We have to look at the bumps in the road. Because if you are a knowledge worker, sure, you can trim meetings. But if you are a nurse or if you are assembling cars on a factory line, you can't just answer emails 20% faster to save a day.
No, you definitely can't speedrun a conveyor belt.
Right. So is the 4-day week destined to just become a new form of white-collar privilege?
That is the major friction point right now, and it's a huge concern for labor economists. If blue-collar workers are expected to maintain 100% of their 5-day productivity in 80% of the time, the reality is that it could drastically increase stress and actually decrease workplace safety.
Because they're just rushing through physical tasks.
Exactly. In a factory setting, speeding up the line by 20% to make up for a lost day isn't just difficult, it's physically dangerous.
So how do we fix that?
Well, the only way the 4-day week becomes truly feasible for blue-collar and manual labor is if advances in automation step in to bridge that productivity gap. Otherwise, the math simply doesn't translate from the office to the factory floor.
And it's not just blue-collar labor that struggles to translate this. Let's talk about schools. We've been talking about this as a corporate math problem about value versus time.
Right.
But when you take this out of the office and apply it to human development, like a child, learning to read, the math breaks down completely.
It's a totally different dynamic.
Yeah. A 2021 study looked at K-12 public schools in rural Oregon. They switched to a 4-day school week, mostly to save money on heating, buses, and substitute teachers.
Like the Utah government example from earlier.
Exactly. But unlike those junior college students in Singapore who thrived with a Wednesday gap day, the Oregon study showed that cutting a day led to lower test scores in reading and math for these younger kids.
And that comes down to cognitive absorption limits. You can't just compress childhood development to save $1 on diesel fuel.
They just can't focus for that long.
Right. Young children need spaced repetition to learn. They can't handle 10-hour instructional days. This really highlights the challenge of societal synchronization. When different sectors of society operate on different temporal realities, things break down.
And a perfect illustration of that friction is the 2023 trial in Valencia, Spain. This was an initiative where the local government scheduled holidays on 4 consecutive Mondays, giving 360,000 workers a 4-day week.
Which is a huge test case.
Massive. Now, the data showed clear health benefits. People reported reduced stress, and the air quality improved because there were fewer cars.
Yeah.
But let's look at the psychology of what people actually did with that time, because there were huge societal trade-offs.
Right. When you give hundreds of thousands of people a Monday off, they leave their neighborhoods, they travel, or they sleep in.
They aren't doing their normal daily routine.
Exactly. They don't do their usual lunch break shopping runs. As a result, the hospitality and tourism sector saw a massive boom in activity, but local retail sales actually declined.
And surprisingly, according to the sources, that extra leisure time led to a measurable increase in tobacco and alcohol use. Like people generally developed healthier habits, like exercising more, but they also drank and smoked more. Why is that?
It's fascinating, right? Because unstructured leisure time without a defined purpose often leads to increased consumption habits. You go to a bar on Sunday night because you don't have to wake up early on Monday.
Or you just sit at a cafe longer and smoke.
Yeah. But the bigger issue here is the service class. If white-collar workers are off on Fridays or Mondays, they want to go to restaurants, they want to travel.
Which means the hospitality industry has to work twice as hard.
Exactly. You risk creating a bifurcated society where service and blue-collar workers are forced into intense, potentially grueling schedules simply to serve the newly expanded leisure time of the laptop class.
And there's also the question of cultural staying power. Like, does this actually stick? In the Gambia, the president introduced a 4-day work week for public officials back in 2013, giving them Fridays off so they had time for prayer and agriculture.
A very culturally specific implementation.
Yeah, but just 4 years later, a new administration completely abolished it and went back to a standard schedule.
Which shows that without deep structural integration across all sectors of society, these policies can be incredibly fragile. They can be reversed with the stroke of a pen if they aren't woven into the actual fabric of the economy.
So, bringing all of this together, the 4-day work week, specifically that 180-100 model, is absolutely not a fantasy. The trials from the UK, Iceland, New Zealand, and Microsoft Japan conclusively prove that it is highly successful.
The data is definitely there.
But it requires a total, ruthless restructuring of how we work. You can't just cross Friday off the calendar, pat yourself on the back, and expect everything to be fine.
No, that's a recipe for burnout.
You have to kill the useless meetings, rethink management entirely, and deeply integrate automation.
It requires an evolution from measuring hours, that old factory mindset, to measuring actual outcomes. And crucially, it requires us to solve the very real challenges of making sure service, retail, and blue-collar workers aren't left behind.
Right, so we don't end up in a perpetual 5-day grind for some, while the rest of the world enjoys a 3-day weekend.
Exactly. The transition has to be equitable.
So what does this all mean for you? As you look down the barrel of another week, I want to challenge you to look closely at your own 40 hours. How much of your current work week is actual needle-moving work, and how much of it is just performative productivity?
Just clicking around so your status stays green online.
Exactly. Are you trapped in 60-minute meetings that truly could have been an email? Are you subconsciously stretching out tasks to fill the time simply because you have to sit at a desk until 5 p.m. anyway?
Parkinson's law again?
Right. Because the data clearly shows that the extra day of your life is already in there. It's hidden beneath the waste. You just have to extract it.
And if we do extract it, if society finally scales this and we figure out how to navigate the blue-collar divide, it leaves us with one incredibly profound, lingering thought based on all this history.
What's that?
If AI and automation continue to advance at their current pace and they actually fulfill John Maynard Keynes' 1930 prophecy, making a 15-hour work week a global reality, are we actually culturally prepared for that much leisure? Or have we tied so much of our human identity, our self-worth, and our sense of purpose to our jobs that we would just invent new, meaningless work simply to fill the empty time?
Wow. Something to think about the next time that Sunday evening dread starts creeping in.